Beverly, I've never told things like this before, and I've got a cold tonight. So I'm going to start and tell as far back as I can remember. I can't remember much about my old folks on my side of the family. I can remember my mother. She died when I was 7 years old, and there was 4 girls younger than I was. I had older brothers that my dad had had by 3 other marriages. He had 4 wives. I had a stepmother. She had children. My father had a set of twins by her. My mother died one night. I can remember when her laying in the bed and her feet was cold, and they would put hot irons to her feet to warm them, but we didn't know that she was dying. I can remember everybody being there and everything, and I can remember going to the funeral. That's about all I can remember about her. Then our father took us, and he moved in a log cabin in a big open field. And our oldest brother was 18 years old, and he was working in a mine. My dad never would work in the mines. He would work around the mines. He had a horse, 2 horses, a team of horses, and he had a big wagon. And he would deliver stuff to people like pickup trucks does these days. And we would go out in the road in the evening, me and my sisters would, and we'd watch to see him coming home. He'd come around a bend in the road, and we would go and meet him. And he'd let us get in the back of the wagon and ride home. And we thought that was just as good as children would now riding in a pickup truck. And we could hear him a-singing all the time. I guess that's the reason I sing so much nowadays, and I'm around by myself and everything. But when he married my stepmother, she brought 4 children into the family, and we didn't get along very well. So after him and her had the twins, she left and went back over in town where her children was used to town. They wasn't used to the country. And we was all the time used to the mining camp. So she took her children and went back over there, and one of the twins had died by then. She just had 1 twin boy, and she had her other 3 children at home. And she had raised them by washing clothes on a washboard and hanging up out in the hall. And our boys would deliver them back and forth to the hotels down there in Middlesboro. That I can remember then when she left, my father took us and moved back down closer to where our oldest brothers and sisters lived. And we would go and stay with them. Our oldest sister lived out in the country, and I liked to go out in the country. She had a big orchard. She had all kinds of fruits in it, and it was all put out in rows. I liked to go there and see them all bloom, and all there was then was just a little path to walk in to go out and get water. We'd carry water about 3 blocks, I guess it would be called, from the spring to the house. And in the wintertime, that was a long ways to go, and in the snow and everything. But then, when she'd keep us a while we would go stay a while with our older brother then, or maybe one of us would stay there, and 2 of us would be with our sister and back and forth. And our father was getting sick by then. I don't remember what was wrong with him, but he was getting sick and he quit work. And he would go back over town, and he'd stay a while with his mother, with his wife, my stepmother. And we would go by there and see her every now and then. They were friends and everything like that, but they just couldn't get along with all of us children together. So finally he let us go to stand with other people, everybody out in the country. And I can remember different places I stayed at. They would have work hands. They'd have a great big long dining room table, And I can remember I loved to go out in the garden and get all the tomatoes and the cucumbers and stuff and bring them in. I like to cook. I like to help her cook. I must not have been over 9 or 10 years old, something like that. And she'd cook enough food for all them work hands in the summertime. They'd all come in and sit down around this big table, but I didn't like having to help wash all the dishes when all of them got gone. But every one I ever stayed with, I can't remember nobody being downright mean to me. I don't remember none of them ever whipping me. But our dad would come to see us once a week, no matter where we was at. And he'd always make us go with him for a walk. And first thing he'd say when he got you out of the hearing of them people, he'd say, "Are they good to you? Do you get plenty to eat? Do they ever whip you?" and everything like that. And if I liked to stay there, I'd say, "Oh boy, yeah, they're good to me." But if somebody done something to me that I didn't like or something, I'd tell him. He'd say, "Let's go back and get your clothes." And it wouldn't be no little old something. I don't remember nobody ever did. It just mean this to me, I guess. I'd want to go stay with my sister, so we'd go back and get my clothes. My daddy would tell them. We decided that she's going to go home tonight and stay with her sister for a while. Well, that would be the last of that place. I remember one time I stayed at a place a long time, and she made me a lot of clothes. And I went to school every day and everything. And I can't remember till today why I quit staying there, but it must have been something that my dad didn't like, because he took me away, and she didn't like it, and she wouldn't give me my clothes. So my sister had to take brand sacks and would order material from Sears and Roebuck for 10 and 8 cents a yard, and she'd make me dresses. And my sister and this old lady went to the same church. And I always went to church with them, no matter where they was at. With the old lady, I rode a horse. And we'd stay all day at this church. And we would have dinner on the ground. And I liked that. Of course, in the wintertime, they didn't take nothing. It didn't hold so long and everything. But I can remember so much of going up on this old hill where it was a graveyard up there. We'd go up. I got two brothers buried up there, and a sister. All my sister's children is buried there. When your papa was alive, every time we'd go down there in the summer months, we would go up to this graveyard. And when I was growing up, though, when we'd go up on this graveyard, they would just an old dirt road up there, and it was steep up as it could be. But when me and Papa come to Michigan and back down there in a little while, they'd pave the road right up to the church door. And it seems so funny now to go down there and go to where my sister's house is. Used to, we would get our dress wet because we just had a little path to walk in, and if the weeds and things was wet, our dress tail would be wet and everything like that. But now you can go in a car right out to her, step out on the steps just about it. I just can't hardly believe that things was like they used to be. I remember before my brother-in-law died, going down there one time, and I was sitting out in their yard on a picnic table, and all of them was in a house, and the man that lived there, my nephew, he come out on the porch, and I said, "Robert, do you ever get out here and sit on this picnic table and think how things used to be?" I said, "Them big old poplar trees over there we used to climb and everything," I said, "they're all rotted and tore down and everything now." He said, "You bet your boots I do." Said, "I sit out here a whole lot of times, and I study about how things used to be, and how everything used to be cleared up around there, and now it's all growed up in bushes and trees, and there's a big railroad went up by there, and now it's all growed up. The train goes up in there about once a week, and used to it went every day, 3 and 4 times a day to get all the coal they got out of the mountains up in there. But now they take it out by truck. They go they call it strip mining or something like that. They tore all the mountains up and everything. And all the old mining camps is gone now. I can remember we lived in a mining camp when your papa got married. I remember we used to go up by there after the houses was all tore down. And I can pick that old tree out till today. I remember washing my hair the night we got married on a Saturday morning. I got out and I washed my hair, and I had so much hair I had to sit out in the sun a half a day to dry it. And now my hair will dry in 30 minutes. But I remember first time I saw your papa, he come up the railroad. If I'm getting ahead of myself, I was staying in a mining camp up in way off from there. And my brother got put in jail for something. My sister-in-law told me, said, you're going to have to go stay with your other brother because I can't keep you here and feed you and him in jail. So I went to stay with my other brother for a while. And that was where I was out on the porch one day, and I seen this fella go up the railroad, and I didn't say anything. And I wondered who in the world he was. So I watched every day, and he'd come up and come find out he was going to the post office. So one day I asked somebody who he was, and they told me who he was. I said, boy, he's good looking. Well, the next week or two I went to church, and he wasn't there. So I kept looking and watching and waiting for him. It seemed like they were just something to pull me toward him somehow. I don't know, you call it love at first sight or what. But one night then at church, he wrote a note, sent a note in there by somebody. They would raise the windows in the old church house, and there wasn't no screens on them. And them boys would stand out the windows and look in there at all of us girls. And he wrote a note and gave it to one of them, and they gave it to me. And won't know if he walked me home that night. Well, I was afraid my brother would get mad about it. And I just ignored it. I said, I wouldn't even give him no answer at all. So when I got out there that night, I went home like I'd always been a-going. So he kept on after me till I just took a chance on it one night, and then he walked up the road. We had to stay right in behind where all the rest was. It was all right in the crowd, like together. I wasn't allowed to get off far from anybody else, like girls do nowadays. You stayed close to home. So church is all where we ever went. He'd walk me home from church and things like that. So I went with him on and off for about 2 years. And the last year that I went with him, I don't think we ever had any fallings out, or whatever you want to call it, but till the day he died, he throwed it up to me. He said he asked me to marry him about a year before I did, and I don't remember it. I'd tell him then, I'd say, I don't remember you asking me to marry you. But he said he did, and I said no. But I guess the next time he asked me, I must have said yes. Now, I never will forget when the night we went to get married. I wasn't but 16 years old. And I didn't have to go with him to get marriage license. You could go and get them your own self. And his dad never knowed everybody down at the courthouse anyway. So we made it up with, he had 2 friends, a man and a woman. That I think there was a little kin to him that lived 2 or 3 houses in a mining camp from where I lived. And he went up there to their house a whole lot in the evening. And every time I'd see him go up there, well, I'd make an excuse. We had a big pump out in the mining camp, and everybody in the mining camp went and got the water. And every time I'd see him go up out that way, well, I'd grab a bucket and I'd go get a bucket of water. So he'd follow me out the pump, and we'd stand out there and talk and talk and talk. Well, the night we decided we'd slip off and get married, he asked that man and woman if they would be a witness at our wedding. And he had an uncle that was a missionary Baptist preacher. And we was going to go to where his uncle was going to preach that night to church. All of us was in there, my brothers and sisters and sister-in-laws and all. We all went up to this one church where this so fellow preached. And so Papa slipped around and he told him, he said, I want you to marry me right after church tonight. I said, we have to hurry it up because my girlfriend's brother finds it out, he won't let us get married. My brother had no idea at all. There wasn't nobody know nothing about it but one of my sister-in-laws, and I know she wouldn't tell it, and the two that stood up for us. Oh yeah, I told my sister that was staying there with my brother too, Sister Catherine. I told her. And I know she wouldn't tell it. She didn't want me to get married and just leave her there by herself. Because her and my sister-in-law didn't get along good. But anyway, that night, just as quick as church was over, we got out, and as quick as we got out the door, we took out around this road. It was a paved road then. Just as hard as we could go, us four did, and we got to this preacher's house before he did. And his wife had went to church. She was there, and some of the children. And we stayed in there till he come, and he married us. So we stayed around there and talked to him a long time, and him giving us advice and this and that and the other. So when they got walking way out, they left the paved road and had to walk about a mile or 2 miles down the railroad to our house. Well, on the way down there, my brother missed me. And he said, where's Fannie at? Where's Fannie at? And one of these, my sister-in-law said, well, Bill, I wasn't going to tell you, said, but I'll tell you now. I said, Fannie's married by now. He said, what do you talk real fast, faster than I do? And he said, what do you mean she's married by now? I said, who did she marry? I said, but now who do you think she married? I said, you know she'd been going with Kermit for a long time. He said, I'll tell you one thing, you better be good to her, you better be good to her. So one day he met your papa out in the road. I was afraid to go back and get my clothes. I had my sister to bring them out to me. And naturally back then the boy took his bride to live with his parents till they get out on their own. I went down to his father's mother. I'd seen him at church on and off and just spoke to him and everything. So they just took me, just like I was their daughter, the way they treated me all the time. And they had one girl that was going to graduate that year, and then they had a girl that was 10 years old. And she seems like a sister to me now. She's come up here 2 or 3 times since your papa died. So one day your papa was coming home from work and my brother met him. My brother spoke to him and he said, wait a minute. He said, I want to tell you something. He said, now you've got that girl. And I'm telling you right now, he said, you better be good to her. Said, me and you'll have it. He said, oh, I'll be good to her, I'll be good to her. He said, well, now, I mean what I said. If you don't want to be good to her, bring her back home. And Papa just kept going, hard as he could go, because my brother was real high-tempered and everything. But we never did go around them too much after we got married. Seemed like we always, they had a whole lot of children and everything. And of course, and then we'd been married 13 months when I had my first baby, Charles, and everything, and we didn't get out and go too much. When we was staying with Papa's parents, they moved out of the house and went and moved somewhere else and let us live there in that big house by ourselves. Well, we didn't like it there by ourselves, so me and Papa moved in a mining camp. 5 or 6 miles from there, but he was working there and he was walking back and forth every day. So we moved up there to mining camp. Then that fall, they moved back down in their old house, and by that time I was ready to have the first baby. So she come in the fire and got us and maybe come down there, and we stayed down there. Was staying there when I had Charles. And then we went back home. And I can't imagine now going back up where we lived and going and staying there by myself of a night. It would scare me to death now. I wouldn't want to stay there in the daytime. Then we moved out of the mining camp and moved up this holler, and it was still scarier. But you were just used to it. You just stayed there all the time while the man went to work, and there wasn't nobody around or nothing. Then we kept on with 2 years later we had your mother. Then I didn't have Sylvia then for about 6 or 7 years. I forget how much difference between their ages and things like that. By that time we had built a 3-room house down in the bottom from where Grandma and Grandpa Cox lived, your great-grandma and Grandpa Cox. And your mother would just want to go up there and stay, and they wanted her to stay all the time. So I just told them to quit begging her to come up there and stay so much. I said, let her stay at home some. They just took her and just wanted to keep her all the time. They didn't get mad, but they quit wanting her to stay every time she'd go up there. Why? Oh, let me stay, and keep on till Grandma Cox would say, you know she could stay. And so I let her stay. But she finally got broke away from it so much. And when her and Charles would play together out on the riverbank, there was a lot of sand out there. And they had all kinds of toys and stuff to play with and everything. And they would put sand all over their hair. I'd have to wash it every night. And when your mother got big enough to go up to her grandma and grandpa's by herself, I can remember one first summer that we started turning her paints. I bought her what was called little bloomer outfits. But it'd be a real short dress with bloomers that come to above the knee, color of the dress. As she peed in her panties, she'd just pull them off and pull them up on the blackberry briars along the path up there. I'd go to wash her clothes, and I'd go to looking for everything to match up, and I couldn't find them. And we got to looking up through there, and they'd be hanging on their briars. So that's where I had to go get her panties when she peed in them. She can't remember it at all. By the time I had Sylvia then, while I was putting a garden out way around on the hill, I'd get up real early in the morning and I'd take your mom in and take whoever was the baby around there with me and take a quilt. And she'd sit on that quilt and hold whoever was the baby till I'd hoe all that garden out before the sun got up. Then we'd come back home. And when summertime come, we'd take her tubs down on the riverbank and a washboard and everything, and we'd wash her clothes down there on the riverbank. We'd build a fire up under an old iron kettle we had. We'd pick the wood up along the riverbanks where it all dried out and everything. Back then you had to boil your clothes and lye. You didn't have no bleach. And them clothes would be just as white as they could be. And then you had to starch everything. I'd starch the boys' clothes, paints and shirts, and Papa's paints and shirts, and the girls' dresses. You'd wash one day, and that night when you took them down off the clothesline, you'd take them in, and you'd sprinkle them down, and you roll them up in something till next morning they'd be real good and damp all over. Well, you'd have to keep a fire in the stove all day to keep them old irons hot on top of the stove. And they had to iron all them clothes. There wasn't no perma-press back then. And I had to put a crease in them boys' paints. And if they wasn't in our right, they'd say something about it. So I'd do my best. But I'll tell you one thing, I really enjoyed raising my kids. People nowadays don't know what it is to patch a pair of blue jeans or something. That was all I knowed, and I just seen what good of a job I could do. I just loved to sit down and sew buttons on their clothes and patch the seat of their pants or the knees of their pants or something like that. And I liked to cook what they wanted to eat. We didn't have no great big lot of something to eat, but we never did go hungry. Back then we had no refrigerators. We would cook beans every day because we couldn't cook enough to do 2 days because we had no refrigerator to put them in. We got electric down in there about a year before we moved to Michigan. They put electric out down in where we lived at. And then I couldn't buy nothing electric. My sister lived up here then. She would bring me her old table lamps, and she bought me the first electric iron I ever had. And people thought, boy, that I was rich at getting all that electric stuff like that. And Grandma Cox, she got her own. She had a gas regular washer. Then when they put the electric up there, she put an electric motor in it. Her and one more woman, till I come to Michigan's the only one that had a Wrangler washing machine. All the rest of them, we done it on the board. I have washed many of a quilt down on the riverbank, and I would put the quilt in a tub and put it out in a creek, we called it. And I'd get on to ranch it. I'd get on that quilt and I'd stomp it up and down till that water got real good and clear. And then me or somebody would get hold one end of that quilt and the other, and we'd twist it till we get all the water out we could. And it was heavy to carry too. And we'd take it up and we'd hang it on the fence. Clothesline would hold it. And maybe it'd take it a couple of days to dry. Then in the winter months is when you had a hard time of drying clothes. You could go out to hang them up on a clothesline, and he'd be so cold you could take a diaper and get it by each end to hang it up to, and time you got the clothespin in it, he'd be froze stiff. But usually by that evening, while they froze dry. But I've tore many of a thing to getting a clothespin off. They would still be froze under the clothespin. But that was all I knowed, and I enjoyed it. I liked to take, we embroidered back then, and I liked to sit around and eat it and embroider and things like that. I about run out of everything to talk to. Vicki said you said your dad and mother made you tape, and they had a whole lot to talk about. I'll have to back up and go thinking of something else. But I really enjoyed life down south, I can say that much. Sometimes I look back and I wonder how we ever made it. But then again, I thank the good Lord for watching over us the way that He did, and we never had to go hungry. We didn't have what we wanted, but we could always go out and if we wanted something bad, we always had chickens. We could go out and kill a chicken, have a big kill of chicken and dumplings, and in the summertime we had frying chickens. Papa would take a 22, and he'd shoot a big old chicken through the head. And we had to heat the water and pour over that chicken and get the feathers off of it. We had to singe it to get the hairs off of it. And then we had to cut them up. Well, that was life to me. I didn't know about a chicken or going to the store and buying one till I come to Monroe. I never will forget that. And I went to Kroger's with my sister, and she said they got chicken real cheap today. And I thought, to myself, my goodness, chicken. We ran around there where it was, and I seen all that chicken, and I thought, boy, that is cheap, and it's already ready to fry. So we eat a lot of chicken when we first come up here, because we really liked it. But I guess that I liked up here. I guess I fared better, I guess, in a lot of ways. Living up here, but I still look back on the days down there and how we fared and what we had and things like that. Me and your papa, we had our good days and we had our bad days like everybody else does, but we always got by. The only thing we knowed was church. That's all where we went. I don't guess we ever went to a show a half a dozen times in my life of growing up down there, because we hardly had any way to get out and get into town. There wouldn't be but 2 or 3 people around there that would have a car, and you could give them back then $1 and they'd take you to town, and you go over and you get everything you needed, and you wouldn't have to go back no more for a long time. But your papa, he'd work in the mines all week long, and he'd get about $5 or $6 is all he'd get out of it, what he worked in the mines for. And he'd come home with, he'd lay that, I've heard him talk about laying flat of his back all day long and digging coal with a pick. And he'd be laying in water. Then he'd have taken a shovel and shovel that coal up after he dug it down and put it in a big old gong of a thing they had. And the mule would pull it out of the mines. And some mines he used to work at, that they had to push their coal out of mines. And he'd come home every evening with his pants legs wet from the knees down. I don't care summertime or wintertime. But that wasn't much worse than when we come to Monroe. He worked at Elderfish Nursery Salon, and he'd come home with the evening wet all over from down there. And all he made when we moved to Monroe was 85 cents an hour for 13 years. And I worked down here at the restaurant for $5 a day. And it was a long time. I had to work 9 hours a day for $5. And then on Friday and Saturday night, I'd have to work 12-hour shift for $5. We didn't get any more. But I was glad to get to work it, to get the money, to pay the house rent and everything like that. But I guess that in the long run, we fared pretty good. I can study back where we used to walk so far to go to church, and now people down there can ride and go to church, and half the time they don't go. But we would walk miles and miles and go to church. And when I was a young girl and walk and go, we would carry our shoes in the summertime to go out inside the church house, and then we'd put them on. We had to save them that much. Then in the wintertime, well, we always had shoes to wear and everything like that, but in the summertime you would get one, you'd try to get you a pair of saddle Oxfords for Easter, brown and white. And boy, we thought they was real pretty. But church was all we knowed. That's all your mother ever knowed back then, was going to church. But we really enjoyed it. If they had revivals and they lasted for 2 weeks, we didn't care. And now if they have a revival and it lasted 4 or 5 days, people's a grumbling over it. But churches nowadays is not like they was back in the old days. But I go anyway, try my best to do the best I can and everything like that. I can remember when my father was with my stepmother. She had a boy that we was afraid of. She had a girl too, and she was afraid of her brother, and me and my other sister was too. And people would give us nickels and pennies and dimes. We lived up this holler, and there was us 3 girls there, and this one boy. And there was no country store down at the end of the lane. And he'd know we'd have some money, change, hid somewhere, and he'd tell us in the evening, he'd say, if you give me your money, I'll take it and go down to the store and get us a bag of candy. Well, it was penny candy. When he come back, he'd have a great big, like a kid takes his lunch in now, full of candy. We'd sit down on this porch waiting for that candy. He'd give me a piece and the others a piece and the other a piece. And when he'd get to his pile, he'd put him 2 pieces. Well, he'd keep it going around like that till it was all gone. And I'd wonder to myself, well, why have you got so much more than we got? But I was afraid to say anything to him about it. Finally, I figured it out what he was doing. I kept watching him. I seen he was taking 2 pieces and giving us 1, but I wasn't saying nothing to him about it. And I can't stand that man till today. He's about 74 years old. And until the last year, I'd see him down. He's here in Monroe now. I would see him down to the bus stop, and he's drunk about every time I'd see him. And I'd hide from him. I can't stand him till today. But I don't guess I need the candy anyway. Maybe the Lord didn't want me to have it, and he just let him take it all. I can remember when my two sisters come to Monroe. They used to get all kinds of dresses and stuff and send them back down there to your mother. She usually had as good a clothes as any girl did back them days and everything. And I never heard your papa say much about his folks. He had a couple of uncles around there that I knowed pretty well, and a couple of aunts and like that. But I don't. Back then, people didn't mix and mingle very much, and they lived far apart from each other. I can remember I had an uncle that worked on the railroad, and he had a great big long beard, and there wasn't nobody else back them days that had a beard. He just as white as snow. And after I got married, me and your papa would walk way across this hill and go over there and see him. But he's been dead a long time now. I guess all of them is by now. I don't ever hear from none of them or nothing. I had some stuff wrote down, but I can't find it. I write it down and then can't read it what I wrote down. I can remember my mother used to, things I can remember her ever cooking. I must have been that 5-year-old. I can remember making biscuits. And she would put them in a cast iron skillet. What I can remember about them was they all wasn't the same size, where she'd push them down in that skillet like that. I can remember them biscuits, and she put white butter on them that she had churned and made. Then I can remember her cooking cabbage. That's the only two things I can remember her cooking. And she'd go out and we'd lift up this holler, and she had a garden right out the back door. And she'd go out that back door, and she'd get a great big cabbage head. I can remember they was huge. And she'd bring them in the house and cut them up in a dish pan and put them on in a big kettle. And she'd cook them like we cook pinto beans now. She'd cook them from morning till dinner. And they was red when she got, the longer you cook cabbage, the redder it'll get. And I can remember that's the only way I ever seen cabbage till years later. They would be red where she'd cooked them so long. But as far as I remember, they was good. And I can remember her again one time. We had a watermelon in a spring, keep it cold. And we lived up this other holler, and we heard my father coming home. She said, "I hear your daddy coming." Said, "I can tell from the way he's singing that he's drunk." She said, "Come on and let's," she took all of us children and went up this holler to where that spring was. We took us a knife and some salt, and we stayed up there and ate that watermelon till he went to bed and went to sleep. Then we come back to the house. But I tell you, nowadays it ain't like it used to be down south. I know where else, like when we was growing up and everything. I get back to church again. Me and your mom would come home from church of a night. And I don't care how cold it was, she hung her clothes up before she went to bed. She took care of her clothes better than any of my kids did. She would always hang them up before we went to bed, no matter how cold it was. And I can remember me and her used to sit out on the porch of a night when it was dark. And I mean it was dark, and all was out there would be lightning bugs lightning up. We didn't live close where we could see nobody, but Grandma and Grandpa's house, and we'd be out on the front porch, and their house was on the back. And we'd sit out there and fight mosquitoes. We didn't have no screens or nothing till we got sleepy, and then we'd go in the house, and the rest of the children would be in the house and be in the bed asleep. But then if I wanted to go see my sister, lived up railroad, I guess 2 miles. Well, I'd get up of a morning when I just had her and Charles. They both could walk because I couldn't carry him away. And we would walk and go up there and stay in time to come back home and be there time Papa come and got to have supper ready. But I remember one time we was coming from up there and he was getting kind of late. Your Papa was with us that time. And your Mommy had got tired and I was carrying her. And Charles said, I'm tired too. Said, I want to ride on your back, to his daddy. His daddy said, come on here, you big old 7-year-old boy. He said, 7 my foot, I ain't but 5. We always had a big life over that. He always called you, he never could say Helen much. He would call your mother baby all the time. She was known by baby by everybody down there just about it. Till we come to Monroe. He still would call, after he got married, he would call her baby all the time. I think this tape's about ready to run out if I've timed it right. And when it runs out, I'll turn it over on the other side and I'll try to get it other side done. I'll try to think up a something else to tell by then. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Through many danger toils and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun.